Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
And my name is Ben.
and we are here to review the game week 15 action. It's another international break. Thankfully, apparently, after this one, we don't have one for a little while, so that would be some nice consolation. But yeah, we'll talk about some of the game week 15 action, some of our sort of thoughts at this point, and get into answering some of your questions as well. But first things first, Dan, how are you?
I'm glad we recorded it on. I've lost track of days. It's Wednesday. I've
Wednesday.
been ill, so I'm
Yeah.
trying to catch up on what day it is. Yeah, what a great result for Luton. Surprisingly, Edward's still in this job. I have to think that's going to stay the same. I should have thought he'd have gone probably before now. So um, yeah, Green Arrow in Gaffr, and we'll get onto that. But yeah, another interesting results, especially at the end of a three-game week.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, we'll come on to some of the team news stuff, but I think there was some very sort of third game of a three-game week sort of selections going on in these games. But there were definitely some interesting outcomes, and some interesting. I think it's some interesting things to take stock of at the international break. Um, but we'll jump into the team news. I'm just thinking very quickly. We're not going to do too much on them today, but I'll just briefly mention because obviously we have had the second set of boosts. I don't
Yeah,
have a lot of thoughts on them at this point in terms of any sort of plans or anything like that, but I will just mention them at the start. We've got overhaul, underhaul, home advantage, follow the leader, triple, and super subs. So if those haven't played before, overhaul, we've discussed is wildcard, underhaul is free hit, and super subs is bench boost. Um, triple is, it's a triple captain, but for all of your captain, vice captain, and emergency captain. Home advantage is 1.5 times all your players at home. So obviously similar to away days, but less of a multiplier. And then follow the leader. Is 2.5 times your captain and double points for everyone else on that team. Uh, Double points for your vice captain and 1.5 times everyone else on that team. And your emergency captain and players from that team also score 1.5. So basically, for that one, realistically, you're looking at three triple ups for that boost. We won't dive too deep into them, as I say today, but any sort of initial thoughts on those, Dan?
I think there's probably two standout ones: triple, and follow the leader. And then um, I did look at to see if there was going to be, there's sometimes the fourth round clashes, but I actually think it's the week after the boost run out, so you can't even use an underhaul. It's always overhauls not terrible. Um, it might just play home advantage if it just lands right.
Yeah, it's I think it's two, and then whichever one sort of suits you at a particular point. I mean, there's been some points where there's been sort of vile benching dilemmas for people where you might just want to throw a super subs at it
Yeah,
if you've got sort of 15 good players in a particular week. Um, so yeah, but I think it leaves it a little bit, up for debate on those. Most people are going to be playing follow the leader and triple though. Um, I haven't looked yet ahead to any of the double game week implications, but as you say, I don't think we can get any this set. I think it will be in set three, if any
well,
happen.
unless
So
unless like a game gets cancelled,
yeah,
well,
but yeah, so that's the boost. So we'll move swiftly on from those. We will discuss those obviously in sort of coming weeks, but just wanted to mention because they'd obviously changed over. But we'll move on to the teams, which there was some certainly interesting bits this week. So I'll hand over to you.
shall we go over our teams?
I mean, we can do. I
Score
mean, I'm probably trying to skim
in
over it.
level. Oh, was
Uh,
it that bad?
no, no,
Oh, you
it was
played.
fine. It's
Did you play
17
any
minus
Boo?
4 for me.
That's
But a
not bad.
red arrow. Um, Palmer and goal for 4, Cooper 4. I brought him in and Chakvetadze. Um,
Okay, that's not bad.
yeah, Ailing off the bench after the Firpo suspension was revealed for 8 points. Sirkin for 9. Nonto captain for 10. Chakvetadze 7. Sainz, who was my emergency captain and became my vice captain because Firpo was my vice captain, that was still 1. Brownhill 3. Mundell 14. Madgen 9. And Piru 9. I also managed to have Callum Lang's 8 on the bench. Um, so yeah, small red arrow, sort of stalling out a little bit, but sort of ready to get going again after the break. But yeah, that was me. How did you do this week?
So I got 82. I'm up to 110. I rolled my transfer. Ended up with 10 players though. Um, Grimshaw 4. I had Firpo, as you mentioned, um, suspended. I also had Doughty and Elder. So I had two playing defenders. Burrows 5, Sirkin 9. The captain Nonto for 10. Vice captain signs. I had Azaz for 20. It's quite annoying. It's between Azaz and Science for vice captain, and I put it on the wrong way around. Mundell 14, Madger 9, Piero came off the bench for 9, and Conway, who was on the bench, and a bit annoyed because if he'd started, he probably would have got a couple of goals against Luton. But yeah, quite a few green arrows in a row for me recently. Um, 3 green arrows in a row since I played my last boost, so it's gone pretty well. Just outside the top 100, so yeah, very happy. Ready to attack the next set of boosts.
Yeah, uh, it also shows the sort of fine margins. A few points here or there. You're on a green
Yeah,
arrow, I'm on a red arrow, so it shows how much it can still sort of vary at this point. But yeah, so now we will move on to the team news.
yeah.
Um,
The biggest task might be can I get through it without having a coughing fit? Um, yeah, so this is just fantasy relevant team news as always. Starting with Watford, they moved back to 3-4-2-1. Andrews and Ebicelli was the wing backs. The front three was Barr and Chakvetadze behind Bayo. Cardiff Willock played the false 9. He was in for Robinson. Borough Ayling was left back. Hackney, Burzog, and Latte Lath were in. Luton, Doughty missed out, obviously injured. We knew that going into the game week. Morris, Clark, and Kraus were benched. Millwall, Colburn, and Bradshaw are in. Honeyman and Landstart were out. Derby, Cashin was out suspended. No Elder. For Leeds, Firpo started. I think it's a 3-game ban. Solomon and Joseph started instead of James and Piero. QPR no chair 3-4-3. Fields is playing as a centre back. For Pompey, Pack played as a centre back. Um, Good news of the weekend: Bishop was back on the bench, scored. I saw they got special like the EFL allowed him to be registered because obviously it's outside of the window, but obviously because of recovering from a heart problem, they allowed it. Norwich, Marcondes was playing as a striker. Coventry, De Silva was left wing back. Rodoni centre mid, no Sheaf. Sakamoto was on the bench. For Sheffield United, no more, and Campbell started up front. West Brom, Johnston was in for Swift, and Burnley, Pires has started the last two, just when everyone got rid.
yeah, I was among them, although that was partially boost related. With sort of needing that reliability, but he's played and he's done well. And I mean, yeah, their games aren't great still, so you
They
know,
are though defensively.
oh yeah, for defenders, amazing. Um, and he's on quite a lot of their corners as well, so just needs a couple of people to even head over from them, and he's in the bonus.
Yes, the Alfie Doughty where Alfie Doughty starts on 4 bonus every game,
Yeah.
mate.
So yeah, so it was a lot of sort of swinging around this week, and you said you're on 10. There were a lot of people who were getting, going second or third sub deep and that sort of thing. The Firpo suspension not dropping till Saturday morning, just for a bit of extra fun. And as you say, it is a 3-game suspension. I mean, you have to assume that Leeds knew before that, but it doesn't seem like great process to announce it the morning of the game. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. Saying that though, it's been quite. I don't know when it was flagged up, and it's also quite a tight window. But yeah, the morning after the numerous groups we were in, it blew up. I was at my son Little Kickers. So what's going on? My phone's blowing up. Blue purpose being suspended.
um, so yeah, so that obviously complicated things, but I think there's some of those where they'll revert back after the break. Some of that was sort of rotation, and so
Yeah.
I think few people sort of suddenly stressing out about players in their teams. I'm not sure there's too much reason for concern at this point. Um, But yeah, so we'll get into sort of what we want to talk about. We will get on to our thoughts on some of the games, but we had a couple of sort of bigger picture thoughts, I think. Um, and it's the international break, so we can sort of take stock at this point, particularly after 15 games. Um, so I'll sort of slot in first because I've got a second smaller one. But I sort of it will tie into Dan's. I wanted to look at the first page of each position. So that's really the top 10 scorers at each position. Um, just to sort of, talk about anything you can sort of identify from those, any sort of interesting notes, how these players are scoring their points, anything you might want to look out for. So I've gone sort of position by position. I will list off the top 10 and then I'll just sort of say anything that particularly jumped out from things like how they're getting their points. So goalkeepers, Palmer is top on 96, Vigouroux on 94, Jensen on 92, Trafford on 89, Johansson on 88, Cooper on 85, Cumming on 84, Meslier on 82, Pears on 82, and O'Leary on 73. So obviously there's a little bit of a drop there after Pears. Um, the interesting thing for me is I think you had sort of a couple of keepers who were really bumping up their numbers with sort of accumulating save points, while a couple were doing it more with bonus points. So, like for example, um, Victor Johansson has 15 save points across the season, but only 7 bonus points. Whereas Alex Palmer, who's the top scorer, only has 7 save points across the season, has 18 bonus points.
But we sort of know why that is, though, because we know low margin games.
Yeah,
Goalkeepers are now a lot more likely to get bonus points.
yeah, but I think it just shows that there's those
Yeah,
avenues where actually you'd think someone like Johansson, oh yeah, but like actually quite as you said, quite a lot is happening in Stoke games, so the
yeah.
bonus isn't necessarily coming with those saves. Um, I think Vigouroux is an interesting one. He's got 10 save points across the season and 14 bonus points. So I think he's benefiting from those. He is. We've spoken about him a couple of times with Jeepers Keepers about making quite a few
Mm.
saves, but because they've had very low margin games as well, he has picked up a few bonus points in there. Um, so the interesting one is the top sort of bonus point scorer in that top 10 was actually Jensen, Millwall with 19. which given that he's the third highest scoring goalkeeper, and after 2 game weeks he was on 0 points.
And
He's
he got
recovered
to
that quite nice.
4.9.
He's recovered that quite nicely, really. Um, Trafford on 15 bonus points. Um, Cooper has accumulated 15 bonus points, but both he and Trafford have only got 3 save points across the first 15 game weeks. And you think that's not many. Ilan Meslier only has 1 save point across the first 15 game weeks. Um, so I think it's instructive potentially going forward with some of these like Johansson's going to pick up those save points. But like particularly if you're looking at bonus points, you're looking at the likes of Palmer, Jensen. Um, they're the top two, but then sort of still on 14 and 15, you've got sort of Vigouroux, Trafford, Cooper, Cumming. So they're I think those still feel like the main like ones you'd want to look at. And obviously saying that Cooper is in there, he's because of the bonus points, and obviously, I mean, a lot of these, they're roughly the same for half clean sheets. I think the least are Johansson and Cumming, so and they're making up for it with particularly save points. Um, I've I've had Palmer for a while. The bonus points have certainly helped with, particularly identifying, okay, there might be some bonus points here with those sort of lower event games, but that's certainly worked out. But I think, you know, it feels like there's a drop off after pairs, and I think you're not going for Meslier just because of the Leeds options. You're probably not going for Trafford. Um, I think there's a drop off after pairs. Like I said, there's like 9 points from pairs to O'Leary, but I think, realistically, unless you're sort of like pairing with like someone with Grimshaw or something like that, you probably want one of those in terms of Palmer, Vigouroux, Jensen, Johansson, Cooper, Cumming, and pairs.
It's probably why, probably maybe an area that I've struggled. I've just gone like Grimshaw and Nardi, and neither of them have done anything. I know some of that was I was planning for cheapest keepers, but I've probably lost out a good few points um, from that.
Yeah, and I think
So,
it's
yeah,
showing with some of that, particularly with some of the bonus points that are creeping in for some of those keepers, that particularly if you, like you're saying, not necessarily for you specifically to do now, but if you've got a keeper situation that you're not necessarily happy with or you're not necessarily getting points from, but
it's worth it.
as we've said, it probably is worth making the change this year in terms of getting onto one of these keepers. And, there are points to be had there.
Just one more thing I've noticed is price rises in goalies. Like you think we haven't got budget buster this set, and that's under 5 million. There's a high chance that there might not be any goalies for budget buster.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically hoping probably on someone like Zetterstrom or
Yeah,
Ashe or
yeah,
Grimshaw.
there will be, but it's just how quickly. Like that's very rare for this to have happened. Like some have jumped up point 0.3. Um, yeah, I'll have to have a look at what like goalkeepers finish on because I've saved all the points scoring. That will be interesting, but I'm pretty sure we wouldn't unless it's like a Johansson who maybe went up a few points. I doubt that because they could go up over 500,000 this
Yeah,
season. That seems seems quite high.
yeah. I mean, the other one that I would just mention here because he would have been on the first page but has missed a few games is Anthony Patterson. I didn't look into
Yeah,
how his points broke down, but it's worth saying, O'Leary on 60, uh, 73, Patterson's on 67, and he's missed a few games. So he's the other one that you could probably consider within that because he was still picking up points. So I think
yeah.
if he's back, he is still one that is a viable option as well, I think. So I'll move on to defenders. So obviously, top at the moment is Dennis Sirkin with 108 points. You've got Burrows with 100. Pires and O'Nien with 93, Furlong with 92, Bogle with 89, Firpo with 88, Ayling, Doyle, and Cooper with 85. Sirkin and um, Sirkin, Burrows, and Pires um, have 26, 27, and 28 bonus points respectively this season. When you think Pires has sort of missed a couple of games in there as well, um, the fact that he's still got 28 points, 28 bonus points this season, speaks to why we were so frustrated that he's left out of the team. Um, Sirkin, it's 3 attacking returns, 2 goals and assists, and 26 bonus points. He's obviously benefiting quite a lot from being in, particularly in terms of goals conceded. One of the best defenses in the league for a lot of this season. They've obviously, I think they've conceded 11 goals, but they kept quite a few clean sheets in there, particularly early on. It's also why Luke O'Nien is fourth. He has 3 attacking returns, only 10 bonus points, but he's got 93 points, in part based off a lot of the clean sheets they kept. Burrows 2 goals and his 27 bonus points. Pires 2 assists and his 28 bonus points. Furlong only has 1 assist all season. That's his only attacking return, and that just happened in the last game. But he's managed to accumulate 92 points, which speaks to, we've talked about West Brom defensively a lot. He's picked up 20 bonus points. Um, Bogle and Firpo, they've obviously missed a couple of games each. Bogle has 2 attacking returns. Firpo has 4. Um, Ayling has 2 attacking returns. An interesting one for me is Callum Doyle has 6 attacking returns. He has 1 goal and 5 assists. Um, he's picked up 16 bonus points, but I think when you account for he missed, I think, a couple of games at the start of the season when he wasn't there. He's ticked along very nicely in the time he's been there. But I was taken aback a little bit when I saw the 5 assists. Um, and Jake Cooper also in there with 3 attacking returns. So in terms of, I think, the sort of takeaway there, aside from Doyle with just a massive amount of assists, um, is, in terms of 20 bonus points or more, you've got Firpo and Furlong with 20, and then you've got those top three, Sirkin, Burrows, and Pires, which I think, you'll come on to some of the ownership later. I think that will shape a lot of the defense for people. Bogle obviously, I think, missed a couple of games, and so I think his 15 isn't necessarily a problem. Ailing on 18. I think a couple of these, particularly like Luke O'Nien, where it is clearly so dependent on clean sheets. I think that's going to be one where, that sort of indicates, okay, maybe that's one you might want to avoid. Um,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that you have, any other thoughts you have on those sort of defenders. Um,
No, not really. I think a lot of them we were priced high because we expected them to drop high. Um, like you mentioned, Nine's a bit of he scored 3 attacking returns. I think that swayed it a bit. I am intrigued with the Millwall defence. I think we've seen. I think was it 4 of the last 5 that kept clean sheets.
Something like that. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so Millwall might start creeping up, and then you got Alfie Doughty literally just missed the top 10, which isn't too much a surprise. And I don't know how much is bonus, but it's probably
That was good. That was going to
pretty
be my
similar.
final. That was going to be my
I was,
final point on the defense because I knew he would come up, so I did look it up.
yeah,
So obviously, I said of those, Pires had the most bonus on 28. Alfie Doughty has 31 bonus points this season. Um,
we said all along he starts on full bonus,
so
like a lot of these.
Yeah, so in terms of him starting games, you can literally say he starts on at least 2 bonus on average,
Yeah,
or more than 2 bonus on average. Obviously, there's mixes in there, but 31 bonus points already for Doughty. I just thought I'd add that in there because I knew I knew it would come up. Midfielders, it's a lot of the same names here that people will have been looking at, but Borja Sainz top on 118 points, Finn Azaz on 97, Wilfred Gnonto on 90, Romain Mundle on 87, Brendan Aronson on 80, Josh Brownhill on 77, Million Manoff on 75, Duncan Watmore on 75, Romain Esse on 73, and Tom Fellows and Jason Knight on 72. So there's actually 11, but it's because Fellows and Knight are joint 10th. Um, some interesting things to note here. So I mentioned 31 bonus for Alfie Doughty, 30 bonus for Finn Azaz.
Yeah,
He's the top midfielder for
in
bonus,
classes.
which not surprising. I think he's top of the league for chances created this season. Although I think they were saying on Friday night that if you go, I think the top three in some order are Azaz, Doughty, and Chakvetadze. But if you go to open
Yeah.
play chances created,
Oh
it's
yeah, it won't be doubted.
Chakvetadze that's top.
Yeah,
But so he has 8 attacking returns in that, but at 30 bonus, which when you think almost a third of his points are bonus points, it
yeah.
shows the potential for him. Sainz has obviously 13 attacking returns, 11 goals, 2 assists. He has got 25 bonus points to go with that.
But that's
Um,
for this attacking returns, right?
yeah, so I think, you see some of these games and some of the goals he's scoring, and they are worldies, and you do wonder about the sustainability, which I think we've seen in the last few game weeks. There's going to be peaks and troughs with him as a result. Um, in terms of the other sort of high scorers for bonus, Mundle on 26 was the second highest of these. Um, Sainz and Nonto have 25. And then we were talking about, because neither of us have gone with him this season. Manuf has 24
Yeah,
bonus. He has 5 attacking returns. Missed a couple of games in there as well. Um, but 24 bonus. And then in terms of it, sort of 20 or more, you've got Tom Fellows has 21 and Brendan Aronson has 20. In terms of the others, Josh Brownhill has 13 bonus all season with 6 attacking returns, which is probably sort of a little bit of a concern for him. Duncan Watmore has
yeah,
16 bonus with 6 attacking returns. So again, it suggests he has to get attacking returns to get bonus. SA has 19 bonus with only 4 attacking returns. So there's a little bit more there for him. Knight has 5 attacking returns, 18 bonus. So there's a little bit more there for him as well. Um, but yeah, I think other than Azaz, and we would have expected the likes of sort of Mundell, Sainz, and Nonto, the way it's gone this season, to be high. I think some of those other ones, there's a little bit of a mix in there. I know a couple of people, including Jamie, went for Essay, and it looks like there's something decent there with him, the way he's ticked along. But I don't know if there's anything else from those that particularly jumps out to you, Dan.
yeah. I'll cover it probably more on the ownership stats, but I didn't like Harrison. Um, I think he's been tickling along nicely, and I've never thought of him once to put in my team. I don't know if you have.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I thought about him a bit, particularly because of when I added Nonto. I did think about Aronson, and I was sort of thinking about him quite a bit. And I think I was going to bring him in until the game that I watched. I can't remember which game it was early in the season, and he just stood out to me, Nonto, and so I went with him. But which I don't regret. But Aronson has sort of, as you say, has ticked along quite nicely. The other thing I guess I will say with this is, as I mentioned, it's made me a little bit. I mean, I was noticing it, but it's made me a little bit sort of like maybe I should get rid of Josh Brownhill, because if he's not
yeah,
returning, he's not doing anything. Um,
just
uh,
because obviously there haven't been too many high scoring midfielders. You've got Chakvetadze.
yeah,
I'm not enjoying saying this, but when saw him play Watford, he's been their best player. That's someone who's going to get better, isn't it? He's going to end up on the first page if he's fit. Like he
Yeah,
does
I mean,
everything that
I
gets
think
points.
he's 6 points off being in the first page, and to be
Yeah.
honest, he could have done that on Friday night. Um, like as I said, I think they said on Friday night he's top in the league for open play chances created. Um, and yeah, I think he will only go from strength to strength. I think he's been playing well so far this season, but yeah, if you were looking at someone who's not in that group, I mean, we haven't mentioned the likes of Hamer, but Chakvetadze is one at the moment who, looking at the way he's playing, you'd expect him to probably be on the first page before too long, if you ask me.
Yes.
Also, as a fun note for me as a Josh Brownhill owner, I messaged you to say this because I was sort of going through week by week. Millie and Manoof had more bonus points in the first 6 game weeks of the season than Josh Brownhill has had in all 15 game weeks this season. So that was fun.
I've missed this Manif hype.
I think it's because he had the injury where he missed 2 or 3 games in the middle, where I think he was really getting
No,
going.
it's because he plays for Stoke. I just have
Yeah, but
blind
I think
spot.
I think I think that we probably were talking about him a little bit. I think it was around game week
Oh yeah,
five
he
or
was getting mentioned.
six, and I think at that point he then missed a couple of games where I think if he'd kept going, we probably would have been looking at him. So I think part of that was a quirk of timing as well. Forwards. This will get bleak quite quickly to spell out what we know. So Josh Madger is top with 106 points. You then drop down to Hadji Wright on 78 points. Josh Sargent on 76, Joel Peru and Jerry Yates on 66, Emil Reese on 64, Facundo Bio on 63, Tom Cannon on 61, Emmanuel Latelaf on 60, and Harlan Grant on 59. Um, so in terms of this, obviously you've got Madger out in front. He's got 9 goals, 1 assist, 31 bonus points. Particularly with the goals he's scored. We've talked about West Brom being a low event game, so when he has scored goals, he picks up bonus. That will probably continue just because I don't see West Brom games suddenly
Yeah,
getting super exciting. So
yeah, it's crazy. Like I think recently West Brom have been on the TV a lot. I saw them in person. Yeah, I was debating getting rid of him. I'm glad I didn't. But yeah, I think Wright's an interesting shout. I
yeah,
like. I
he's had a little run
debated.
recently, which
Yeah,
I think has moved him up quite significantly.
that was
Um,
when you got rid of him, Angus.
Yeah, yeah. He scored in basically every game since I got rid of him. That's fun. So he's got 7 goals and 1 assist now. He's only got 16 bonus points. So obviously I said Madra has 31. Wright only has 16. So I think that's something to potentially be wary of with him, is he probably will score goals, but there at least so far there hasn't been a lot of bonus that comes with it. Um, Josh Sargent, we've obviously talked about. He's obviously out injured. I mean, Hadji Wright, it's worth bearing in mind, also went off injured. I think he got stretchered off the at the weekend. So that might be another one that's an issue, but sort of wait and see what the deal is with that. But Sargent got injured. We talked about how well he was playing. He was there with Madger in terms of like you're just going with him.
Yeah,
76 points, 9 attacking returns, 4 goals, 5 assists, 20 bonus along with that. Like it's the same story with him. Great option when he's fit, but he will inevitably get injured.
yeah.
Um, Peru, 6 goals, 2 assists, only 8 bonus points. Um,
He doesn't
which
do a lot in
yeah,
games, does
which
he?
makes sense when you think about it. You expect him to chip in with attacking returns, but it's what he's there to do. He's there to essentially finish things off and that sort of thing. So I think um, he's fine to have. Jerry Yates, who's on a little bit of a run of form. Um, I've obviously been on the record previously as being a big fan of Jerry Yates ever since his performance was 2 years ago with Blackpool. I think he's very capable. Um, he's got 20 bonus points with his 5 attacking returns. So he's been doing very well for Derby. Um, Emil Reese, 5 attacking returns, 13 bonus. I think even in 1 or 2 games where he has returned, Preston have taken some notable defeats, so that's also affected his ability to get bonus. Bayo, 6 goals, 12 bonus. And I think that's because he had the 4 goals in 1 game, so he could only get 4 bonus in that. So it's difficult to sort of read it across too much. Cannon, 6 goals now, 1 assist, only 9 bonus. Latte Lath, 4 goals, 1 assist, 16 bonus. So there's a little bit more there when he plays. And Carlin Grant, 3 goals, 1 assist, 15 bonus. I think that's another one though with West Brom low event games, similar to Magyar. Um, so yeah, I think it's interesting with the forwards in that you're getting obviously more attacking returns in there as you would expect with a lot of these, particularly with the goals. I think it's interesting that you've got Magyar on the bonus, but then um, particularly Jerry Yates being on 20 bonus along with Josh Sargent. I think he's doing quite well. Latte still ticking along. Whether you want to go with him when it's debatable whether he's going to stay in the team even because Conway had obviously started up until the Luton game. Whether Carrick really wants to reverse that based on 1 game remains to be seen. But yeah, the fact that with a couple of them like Piero and Cannon, you're really banking on those attacking returns. It's just something like struck me as something to bear in mind as well. I don't know if there's anything else that sort of jumped out to you from the forwards.
Not really. It's not been a good year for the forwards, has it, this year?
No, and then a couple, you've got a few just off the first page. So you've got Mark Harris and Callum Lang, uh, Matteo Joseph, and Callum Robinson, who were all within 4 points of being sort of Carlin Grant in 10th spot. So not necessarily to be written off, but just thought I'd mention those. But yeah, it's not been as I said, it would get bleak with the forwards, but I think there's still some potentially interesting takeaways there. Um, in terms of sort of some of those sort of bonus elements and whatever. Um, Across those positions. I think it shows that particularly sort of those fullbacks, particularly if they're on any set pieces or attacking, and those sort of midfield, those sort of creative midfielders, particularly chance creating midfielders. Um, Still, it shows that the same patterns still remain, but identifying who those are. If anyone really wants to be spared the work of manually adding up the bonus for those guys for the uh, top 10 at each position, let me know. And if there's enough sort of demand, I will post these numbers. But um, let me know if you particularly want to know about these and anyone else within reason. I'm not going to sort of go through and add up like what Alex Mowatt's bonus is. No one needs that.
Been pretty decent.
But yeah, so that's just a bit of a deeper dive into the top 10 at each position. I was just intrigued to see if there was anything in how they got their points, which found interesting. Hopefully, you guys did too. That's me. I'll hand over to you, Dan, for what you wanted to cover this week.
Yeah, so um, my key topic this week is ownership. Um, I've looked at the top 25. I've done this a few times previously over the years. And I think 15 games after the first set of boosts reset, everyone's played 3 boosts. So you sort of get a fair lead of the board. So it's one of those I've been wanting to do for a while, but it wasn't really worth it until the next set of boosts. Um, so I'll start with goalies. Um, the standout is Cooper. 16 of the 25 had Cooper in their team. Um, and then you then had pairs with 8 of the 25 Hazard, who's just obviously been injured, but obviously was cheap, so they probably started with him. Johansson 5, Grinshaw 3, and Cumming 3. There's a few others with 1. Um, Anything shocking there, Angus? Basically, I didn't want to go Cooper at the start because I thought there'd be 3 Sheffield United outfield players, and it's turned out there hasn't been. So we've seen Cooper tickling uh, along nicely. So yeah, I don't think it's a massive shock.
No, I mean, I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Where we were sort of convinced early on, or relatively convinced, that Sheffield United would have a number of sort of good outfield options, which hasn't really materialized. So I think Cooper has been viable to just sort of stick with. Um, and yeah, like you said, particularly someone like Hazard, a backup. Like, if I hadn't been playing Jeepers Keepers, I still would have had Connor Hazard.
Yeah,
Um, I think it's interesting, a couple of those, particularly talking off sort of the point scoring and everything. For example, that only one person owns Alex Palmer, who's the top scoring
yeah,
keeper in the game. Only one person owns Vigouroux, who's the second top scoring goalkeeper in the game. um,
yeah. Especially with Vigouroux, because he's not even expensive.
yeah,
You can understand it maybe a bit more with Palmer. Um, I just think playing fantasy games, you're just basically taught not to go expensive with the
yeah.
goalies. Whereas I think and obviously we've seen there are cheaper options, but it's not like I don't think it's as bad as it was previously in Gaffr, where it was
No,
basically get a
yeah.
cheap goalie. It's definitely more viable, especially for like 5 million goalies.
Yeah, I think seeing that bit more ownership, I think Patterson's ownership probably would have been higher if he hadn't missed the last
Yeah,
few. But seeing some of that ownership around the likes of Johansson, I think makes sense.
yeah. So we'll go on to defenders. Burrows 23 of the 25, Sirkin 19, Doughty 19, Firpo 19, Perez 12. We've got a little bit of ownership, a fair bit for Furlong with 7, Bogle 7, Hagan 3, Andrews from Watford 2, Stoik from Leeds 2, and Cabango 2. There's what 8 to 10 with 1. Um, I don't think that's surprising, really. Doubt he probably might have had a couple more. It was quite well known he'd be out. Um, I don't think there's too many shocking ones in there, really, Angus.
No, no, not at all. I think it's and it chimes with, obviously, the tops, like the people at the top probably have the top scoring defenders and everything. But
Yeah,
even a couple of them, like Begum having 3, I think a lot of people that probably would have been higher. And then the last few weeks, people have been moving off sort of some of the West Brom defense, particularly someone like Hegum. I mean, Cabango is just outside the top 10, for example.
yeah.
So I think,
Cheap as well.
yeah.
Kabang.
So I think that sort of thing makes sense. It wouldn't surprise me if at least one of those Andrews owners went very recently, with Watford having a little bit of a fixture turn. But yeah, it all sort of, there's nothing sort of to it that jumps out too sort of dramatically there.
So, question with Firpo out for 2 more games. Do you think people will move, or will they just bench him? We've got a lot that have Doughty and Firpo. Not heard anything about the Doughty. If that's long term, that's an easy sell. And if he's a sell, you probably keep Firpo on the bench, or do you maybe just switch him to Bogle?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting debate there, like you say, and I think it does depend on some of these issues. Like, some people will still have, injured players even from previous that they sort of kept because they had to make
Mm,
other moves, or, things like that, where, there are going to be people there sitting with things to fix, where, do when Junior Firpo will be back after 2 games, he misses Swansea away, Luton home, and then he's back. Like, that. I think it really does depend on your flags. I think it does depend on sort of the Doughty injury. Um, I saw something the other day that like Romain Mundle has an injury that they're assessing the severity of.
Oh no, it's half my team now, Angus.
Yeah. So if he has it, but that's the thing where he might be fine, but if he has an issue, then someone with Firpo might sort of be forced
Yeah.
into holding him, that sort of thing. So I think it's certainly viable, particularly in the short term, to go to Bogle, even if at some point you want to reverse that back. But I think it really does depend on any other sort of injuries and that sort of thing.
Is there a surprise with that? The defenders. There was a surprise when I was looking at Angus.
Um, not. I mean, you've sent me the full sort of numbers,
Yeah.
so I'm just going to throw out there that someone out there in the top 25 owns Louis Coyle. Like that, I'm not even saying it's a disaster. I know I mentioned him at one point recently about Hull, but I'm slightly surprised someone out there does own Louis Coyle. But yeah, otherwise, not massively to me.
My biggest surprise was there wasn't much Millwall defence. That there is one person
Mm,
who has Brian, um, but maybe, like I said, some of these people might be on Burrow, Sirkin, Doughty, Firpo, and Furlong, and they
yeah,
might not needed to change out to Millwall. So I do wonder if we might see a bit more Millwall coming up, but
yeah.
I suppose there's not really attacking ones. I know Cooper's scored a few headers.
I think
Maybe that's
it
why
would
it's
be
been
Joe
lacking.
Bryan. We talk about set pieces. He took some, which obviously he missed
Yeah,
the last game. Where I do think there might be a couple on him, but I mean, you probably for those looking, you if you haven't got one, you probably want to get through the Sunderland game, and then on the other side, play Portsmouth and Oxford. So you might see that tick up a little bit.
yeah. Onto midfielders. Signs is the only player that was in all 25 um, teams. I don't think that's a massive surprise. Nonto 19, Zaz 17, Mundle 15, Manuf 9. I looked through the top five and they all had Manuf. I said to Angus, when's Manuf a thing? Like, I was starting to get worried. He's in like 15 teams. I think he's a decent option,
Yeah.
as we've mentioned throughout. He's on 9. Brownhill 7. We've mentioned maybe that slips a bit. We've then got two budget players, Volts and as from Derby, 6 and 5 respectively. Arison 5, Kolyoshu 3, Hamer 3, Fellows 2, and then you've got another um, about 8 with 1. That top lot feels very template, especially Signs, Nonto, Azaz, and Mundle. Um, I'm trying to think who I have in. I have Chris Rigg from Sunderland, but I do have Signs, Nonto, Azaz, and Mundle. You've obviously got Chakvetadze, who doesn't have any in the top 25 Angus, so maybe you're ahead of the curve with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a particular edition, obviously, on Friday night for this week, and I do think that, that Watford ownership may pick up a little bit. They do have a nice run, and so I do think that's something that might pick up, particularly the other side of the break. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't have a Zaz. I was talking to you before. A Zaz is the one for me.
Yeah,
All else being equal, for me personally, Brownhill to Azaz is staring at me um, sort of for after the break. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of it makes sense. And the little bits and pieces, even the fact that Manuf, we talked about him, and um, again, the other thing to jump out. I mean, there's one Watmore owner. There's no SA ownership. The two Millwall guys who were in the top 10 for points, so no one's owning them. Um, And shout out to the one person who owns Morgan Whittaker. I think that's an interesting one because I think he's done reasonably well, but for his price, that's an interesting one to be owning.
Yeah, I wonder if well, they did just play Portsmouth, didn't they?
Yeah.
So one there was a little run there, so I wonder if they got him in for that. Not a bad punt.
Yeah.
Um, Forwards, this is normally when I've done this, have been about six forwards, and they've all two of them had like 18 or above. But so Madger 22, Piero 10, Wright 8, Joseph 6, Isidore from Sunderland 5, Bayer 4, Cannon 4, Conway 4, Lang 3, Badia 2, Reese 2, Sargent 2, and there's I might as well Sinclair Armstrong with 1 and Jackson with 1. Um, Basically, it's Madger, a Liverpool striker, not Liverpool, Leeds striker, and then a range of strikers where I think a lot of people have just been taking punts maybe on fixtures or if you were playing away days or things like that. Um, I'm guessing Madge not a surprise. I have Piero and Conway. We've mentioned White was good. Anything stand out? Isidore maybe. I'm a bit surprised he had 5, but it's not
I
really
knew a
massive.
few had been I knew a few had been going for
Yeah,
him, so that doesn't necessarily surprise me. I think as we've sort of said, particularly the Leeds striker as a second option, but where we've sort of been talking about, particularly when Sargent went down and everything, just sort of like taking a punt depending on when you were making it, particularly that sort of, mid-price striker and sort of deciding which one you like. I think we're seeing that reflected there. I mean, Wright's slightly more expensive, but then the fact that you've got a little bit for Isidore, a little bit for Bayo, a little bit for Cannon, a little bit for Conway, a little bit for Lang, a little bit for Reese, like they're all there. I think speaks to that, and the fact that it can be any of them and it can work at the moment also shows that shows up in that like you don't there isn't necessarily a correct one to pick.
no. For me, it's try and be aggressive with the forwards. Maybe keep Madger just because, as we mentioned, he's ticking along, gets top bonus if they do anything. But maybe keep rotating the strikers until maybe an obvious one comes up. Um, yeah, just go for it for maybe 3 or 4 game spells, and don't be afraid to swap them.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree.
What do you think formation wise? Because if you looked at the points scored plus um, the positions, sort of what they're playing, I think a lot of people have been playing 3-4-3, but I wonder if maybe it is maybe like 4 or 5 at the back, especially if like a Firpo and Doughty are fit. Is that maybe the better formation? Do you think moving forward?
I think so. I think there's something in, at the moment, potentially having not necessarily a dead spot striker, but like one of these cheaper forwards, and you go say a 3-5-2 or a 4-4-2 or something like that, or a 4-5-1 even.
Yeah,
Um, I've seen a couple of people sort of playing that in certain weeks, but I think um, you know, particularly something like a 4-4-2 could be sort of viable at this point. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it might swing around in terms of at certain points where if you're taking short-term punts on forwards that you want to keep playing, a 3-4-3, 4-4-2, 3-5-2, 4-3-3, they're all options. But I think, we probably are at a point where we're looking more in the 3-5-2, particularly in the short term, if you're keeping someone like Firpo, or a 4-4-2, might well be the way to sort of go for a bit.
because I've noticed a lot more recently, Angus. We do the pod team, And a lot of the times you'll have like a vice captain on a defender. I know a
Yeah.
couple of weeks ago I vice captained. I think it was the midweek I vice captained Doughty. He obviously got the assist and the clean sheet. Is that more of a play to maybe because we've got like West Brom defenders, Sunderland are doing well, clean sheet. Maybe Millwall if you move there, Leeds. Is it worth backing these defenders for vice captains?
I think so. I mean, I've been burned a couple of times doing it. Um, I don't necessarily feel burned by doing it this week on Firpo because he
Yeah,
didn't play. Like my
clean
emergency
sheet as
captain
well.
wasn't great, which was the thing that burned me. But like, I don't think the vice captain on Firpo was the problem. I think the first time Perez got benched in this stretch, I vice captained him, which obviously we've seen
Yeah,
with the points and everything. When he plays, that's a good call. It just so happened that I got caught out in that moment. But I do think these defenders are showing that they are vice captaincy options, particularly these ones where they are getting forward, they are taking set pieces. We talked about Doughty, Perez, someone like a Joe Bryan. Sirkin takes some of them
mm,
for Sunderland, but like particularly those sorts of guys that there might be something in there in terms of a vice captaincy. I do think at the moment.
yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, so that's ownership. We might get back onto this maybe halfway through this set boost. Probably definitely will at the end of the set, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, and like you say, I think it's also interesting that it reflects some of the things that we thought already.
Well,
Um,
yeah, you've done some research that sort of backs up what I was saying. But
yeah, and I did think it might tie in a little bit, but it's always interesting to see how that actually goes together, but it's not necessarily surprising that it does. So I had a little extra thing just on some of these particular things with certain teams in terms of we often look at targeting teams, particularly for, we've talked about with armbands as well. But I think there's some of these teams where there's little sort of notes in their performance or in their numbers suggest, okay, maybe just factor that in when you've got sort of a player against that team. It's not necessarily in depth. I haven't necessarily gone into the advanced numbers, but there's just a couple of things that stood out to me when I was looking, particularly looking ahead or looking at certain things where it's like, okay, players against these teams, that sort of thing. First one, we've mentioned them a couple of times, is Swansea. So Swansea, I think, are the perfect example at this moment of you want to target them in one way and not necessarily target them the other way. So Swansea have only scored 11 goals in 15 games. So if you've got a defender against Swansea at this point, that is a good move. And if you particularly, if you've got one of these who might create a few chances against Swans, like a few key passes or whatever against Swansea, it's a great option. Swansea have also only conceded 10 goals in 15 games. So you look at them and you think, not great. But particularly if you're looking at armbands, that suggests you don't particularly want an attacker against Swansea with an armband. Which, I realise I am saying this as we look ahead to the game week after the international break where Leeds play Swansea. But I think it's particularly relevant to consider where, that might not be it might be they haven't played a couple of these bigger teams and that's why that number is the way it is. But at the same time, it's something to bear in mind. Do you really want to put an armband on your Leeds attackers when that even those just basic numbers suggest it's not necessarily the best idea. Unfortunately, it makes it sound like it would have been a great game to put an armband on Junior Firpo, who is unavailable. Um, but yeah, I just thought something like that is the thing. It's also worth noting, given that Leeds go away to Swansea, Swansea have only conceded 3 goals in their 7 home games this season. Um, So yeah, that feels particularly pertinent at the moment. I don't know if you have a thought on that in particular, Dan.
I don't know. Leeds are good, aren't they? If
Oh yeah,
anyone's
they
gonna,
they could put sort of three or
yeah,
four past anyone in theory. Like,
yeah,
um, although I gave a similar warning about the potential attacking ahead of the trip to Millwall, and we saw how that went. So
that is true. Yeah, I'm
um,
trying to think who I got my armband on now. I'm not sure if I've changed them, to be
I
honest.
don't think I have, but it's just something to, I guess, for people
I
to
haven't
bear in mind.
changed them.
Or they might sort of write it off and just be like, Leeds are that good that they might win anyway, which is a perfectly viable theory as well.
Yeah,
Um, Oxford, a similar example, but not quite as extreme as Swansea. They've only scored 17 goals in their 15 games. So another one with particularly defenders. I think it's, the fact that you're probably not going to be conceding multiple goals in a game, at least in terms of that suggestion. I think, defenders against Oxford are another team to potentially look for. But on the flip side, they've only conceded 18 goals in their 15 games. So it's another one where I think, some of these teams can probably do a job against them, and we've seen some teams do well against them. I think, to be honest, there was a little bit of fortune on Friday night that they only conceded one goal. Um, but I think, it's just something to bear in mind that they're not necessarily a leaky side, even if we've talked about them a couple of times this season. I think, they might concede a few more going forward, but at the moment, you know, whether you necessarily want to target them is another matter. Um, One that's the flip side, and I'm apologizing to a couple of uh, a few of our listeners here because I know we have a few listeners from who support this team. The flip side of this is QPR. QPR have scored 12 goals this season and conceded 25.
yeah. Well, they have beaten Luton, haven't they? So isn't their
um,
only win?
can't be far off. QPR have won one game this season. Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's just sort of like, that is something on the flip side I just wanted to say in terms of like that's, particularly the 12 scoring 12 goals in 15 games. Now I know this won't come as a surprise to their fans who've talked for a while about they've struggled to score. Like I know recently it hasn't been quite as bad defensively, but I think it's still been a real struggle in attack for them. Um, you know,
Praise me now, isn't he? Dembele,
Dembele's been out.
Eggs in and out.
Chair's now injured as well. I think that, particularly for the next sort of two or three after the break, that could be rough for them still. Um, West Brom, we've talked about them. Only scored 16 goals in their 15 games, so I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about having a defender against them. Um, but as we know, they're one of multiple teams where, in terms of you would probably not be that opposed to having a defender against them. In terms of an attacker, they've only conceded 9 goals this season. Um, so I think, defenders against them absolutely fine. Where you might look at it in theory as a bad fixture, but it's a lot of what we've said and seen so far this season suggests that's not necessarily the case. Um, And yeah, I mean, a couple of the sort of lower scoring teams who have conceded a number of goals. One of them is Luton, 17 goals scored, 26 conceded. We talked about that, that some of those have come in little bunches, um,
I
which,
think we conceded two or more goals the most in the league.
yeah.
It's weird because some games we look pretty solid, and then others we just get absolutely battered. So
And a similar one is Sheffield Wednesday, who scored 17 goals and conceded 25. I think they've had a couple of games where they've chipped a few, um,
yeah,
which probably weighs into that. But yeah, I think some of these ones, particularly to bear in mind, I mean, the Swansea one obviously particularly jumps out to me, but just a couple of those ones, Swansea, Oxford, where those numbers suggest maybe it's a little bit tighter than you might think. Um, and, QPR potentially one to target in particular. I didn't get into Plymouth, but they're another one. Obviously, we've talked about defensively. Portsmouth, um, those sort of regular teams. I think that sort of stand out there. But just sort of a couple of these that have sort of those slightly different stats, particularly between attack and defense. So yeah, so that's sort of that, just sort of flagging up a couple of things which I might have forgotten by the time it gets to game week 16, but were just sort of interesting. Uh, do a little bit now on the actual action itself from game week 15. Just things that jumped out. I know I've mentioned it a couple of times. I'm going to start by talking about Watford. I think I was one of the few people who was actually watching the Watford Oxford game on the Friday night. Oxford did have a couple of good chances in there, particularly once Mark Harris came on. I think he
Yeah,
made
he
the
missed out that
difference.
kick, didn't he?
But Chakvetadze, best player on the pitch by a mile. Um, at times, I think I messaged you and I messaged someone else as well to the same effect. Watching him try and sort of play football with the other Watford players at times can be quite entertaining. There are times where they're not quite on his wavelength. Um, but it's also just when you have a standout player like that. There were times in the second half in particular where he was just like, I'm going to go and run past five players now, and just went and ran past five players. So that sort of thing was it's always fun when you have a player like that who can just do that, who can just decide to do that and do that. I thought Bayo, he did well for his goal. He had another chance, but and I think he's sort of finding a little bit of form now. Um, but yeah, I think the main thing for me was I was just so impressed by Chakvetadze in that game, and it was sort of like in what wasn't necessarily a great game, he was something that was just really he was something that was enjoyable to watch about it.
Yeah, I'm going to mention the Middlesbrough game. Um, Basically, just how good we've mentioned them numerous times. Ben Doak and Azaz. I think Ben Doak could be an option moving forward.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it, or I know we talked about it in the midweek with the midweek game. I think I'd been watching them against QPR in midweek, and I said Doak and Azaz are much better than everyone else. And then we got to the weekend, and they
Yeah,
played well
they
again.
are good. It was such a weird game though, because for the first 30 minutes, it was so even.
Yeah.
Like, just a couple of mistakes from us, and then completely lost the plot. Um, Next one, Angus. Anyone you want to bring up?
Um, just wanted to mention the Stoke Millwall game, in part because I was taken aback that Millwall conceded a headed goal from a corner. What's going on?
I thought that when I saw it. I was like, that must have got to be from a set piece.
Um, so yeah, that just confused me greatly, but it happened. The other thing that I'm going to sort of jump in from another game, just because it's something that sprung to mind for me, was you mentioned it earlier, but the Colby Bishop return.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's massive for Portsmouth.
and very nice of uh, Callum Lang, particularly given that he didn't come off the bench for me, to give Colby Bishop the penalty to get the goal on his return. I think there were a couple of comments afterwards, like because Callum Lang is the penalty taker, that he was determined to give the ball to Colby Bishop to for him to have that moment, um, which is obviously lovely, but massive moment for him, massive moment for them because that basically clinched the game.
Yeah,
Um, and just massive for them as a club to have him back.
yeah. We mentioned at the start of the season. I think we were all interested to see how he would do. He's one of these who has quite good record in the lower leagues. I'm surprised he's back this quickly, but I'm guessing because they found the problem before. Well, anything drastic happened, like Lockyer or someone like that, it doesn't take as long to come back from. Um, they need a goal scorer, and he if he gets, I don't know, 10 odd goals, got a chance of maybe keeping them up. Well, it's definitely a better chance. Um, I'm going to mention, sort of in a group, the three Sunday games, if that's right, Angus.
Yeah.
As someone who backed them all to be 1-0, 1-0 to Sheffield United, 1-0 to West Brom, and 1-0 to Burnley. I was a bit unhappy when that West Brom game was 2-1. Um, Predictable, weren't it? I think Sheffield United were pretty comfortable once they got the goal. It was nice work goal, and Campbell took it quite well. Um, they look the scary thing is Sheffield United haven't even started clicking up front. We've mentioned this a few times. If that starts happening, or they buy a couple of players up front, I think they're going to go up automatically. Sheffield United and Burnley. I don't know how they keep getting 1-0 wins or points, but it's a penalty at the end, and J Rod stepped up.
Yeah, although to be fair to them in this one, this was different to some of the others where they actually had quite a few chances and didn't manage to score. So that's the one thing I'll say in their credit, or at least this one, they were having chances. They did actually create chances. It just took them a long time. But yeah, they certainly couldn't, given some of the ones they've nicked recently, they certainly couldn't have felt hard done by if that finished 0-0. Um,
What's your goal of the weekend, Angus? I
uh,
think I'm
it's Finazaz, I think it's the fifth goal for Borough.
really. You're not
Yeah,
even going to give it the overhead kick for Yates.
no, as much as I love Jerry Yates and I love an overhead kick, I think the fact that it was partially the game state, which is also what makes me love the Finazaz goal. That it was just like, it's sort of like you're cruising and it's like, no, I still want to I want to do this. I'm still going to keep trying to do this.
You know what? He hit it, and I was like, "Oh no, that's it."
Yeah.
As soon as he hit it, I wasn't even there. I was watching it.
It's also really funny for me as a Luke Ayling owner when he gets an assist for just giving him the ball before he wants it to fuck off. Um, but no, I just like particularly just I really enjoy any time, like obviously it's not great for you in this particular case, but I really enjoy any time a team like keeps going when they're in the lead. I think far too often teams sort of sit off, they get sort of a couple goals up and it's like, okay, we're comfortable now, and that can become uncomfortable very quickly. Appreciate teams that have that have that sort of drive to keep going. And so I
Yeah.
think that was part of it as well. Um, so yeah, so that's all that. So we will now get onto the questions that people have asked us. We've got five of them here, although I see one of the tweets has a couple of questions in it, which is fine. We're always willing to accept that. So Auto Reclose has asked us, should the 1.5 times multiplier be rounded up in all aspects of the game? I'm not
I'm quite.
convinced. I think there's an argument going forward for actually getting the half points. So, like, if you have a 9 point vice captain, that it's actually 13.5. Um,
I don't hate it. I, it's been the same. I
it feels
just
a little
used
bit
to it.
like changing for changing's sake at this point. Plus, you could just easily argue. I mean, I've been part of this debate already. You could argue for rounding up. You could argue for rounding down. I think the argument. I think in theory, I can't remember exactly, but I think in theory the argument from the guys would be, say you've got a 9 point vice captain. If you take half of that, they've only got 4 whole points in addition to that. So it's like it's rounded down, but um. Yeah, I mean, I'd be in favor of actually getting the half point, but I don't have any strong feelings about it being rounded up or down. Um, Non-stop FPL, Firpo replacement or downgrade to cheap? They already have Sirkin, Burrows, Esteve, and Pires.
I think. I think with those options, I'd probably just keep Firpo.
Yeah, and unless, like you said, you want to do the particularly short term, maybe you stick with it, but the switch to Bogle. Um,
Yeah.
unless you want to do that, I I probably wouldn't bother changing that. Um, Dream Team Gaffer, are we expecting any double game weeks during this set of boosts? So I know we discussed it briefly earlier. I don't think we're expecting, certainly not any doubles in this set, barring sort of a weather postponement.
But
But
can they? I can't remember. Was it this last year we had the thing where they moved the game forward because the FA Cup they were in the fourth round? Did that happen, Angus?
I think it was 2 years ago. Um, so in theory they could, but I think that was moving them sort of
I can't remember what round it was.
into another game week that
So I
was
know it
going to,
really
if it was
shocked.
moving them into a blank or something like that. But I don't think we'll see anything in terms of doubles.
It's weather related. Obviously, you're in the
Yeah.
championship. Like Luton could get a game postponed because of weather. A couple of them are nearly being postponed
Mm,
this year. I think the Watford game was pretty close
yeah. So
from
that's
what I
something,
heard.
particularly as we go in, move towards December. It's something people are always on the lookout for. Snow. Snow is always a fun one. Sort of ice. Particularly certain grounds, I know they're always really concerned if it gets icy in terms of the approach to the ground. I know it can happen at any ground, but I know there's some grounds where they're more concerned about it, particularly if you have to walk up a hill, for example. That's always a big concern if it's getting icy. But yeah, outside of weather, I don't think we can get any doubles in this set. Um, and Joe Jenkins, I think has a couple of questions for us. I'm not sure which one came first. I'm gonna go with the fact that there's one that ends with thanks for the great content, guys. So the other one came first. So he says, are Burnley midfielders bad enough to just be hitting out of our teams? For context, eyeing up Brownhill and Kolyosho out for Chakvetadze and Azaz. Both
I
would
mean,
be
that's a
for
no.
hits.
I
Do
mean,
it.
I'm tempted to just
Do it.
do it.
Do it. I've got Chakvetadze. Also, particularly if Watford games are on TV, if you want to make Watford games more enjoyable, own Chakvetadze. It's probably changed my viewership of that game for the better. And yeah, we've talked about Finn Azaz, like great option at the moment. Um,
I think the best thing about Luton doing rubbish is we're not on TV that much in the next set of fixtures.
Yeah,
You
as
know,
they start,
the 3 o'clock
start
game.
seeing, they're starting to announce. I think what is it, January, February? They've just been announcing, and you start seeing, okay, some of these teams are getting bumped down a little bit. Others of these teams are getting bumped up a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, Joe also asked, what chips from the new set, they're boosts, but we'll let you off. Uh, do you think you'll use, and what weeks do you think are good for their use, either in general or specifically for your team? And he says, thanks for the great content, guys, which, we always appreciate any sort of flattery. Um, so we've sort of said triple triple. I'm not too concerned about when I use triple triple. Triple triple is one of those ones that you can just walk into in a given week and just be
yeah.
like, oh, I've got three people with great games this week. I'm going to play triple triple sort of thing. Um, so that one I don't necessarily have specific plans around. Follow the leader is the other one for me. That I will be playing. And I think it's just identifying, I think first for me, which, a week where three of those teams that you'd want to play it on have a good game. So I think, and as we've seen in previous seasons with Follow the Leader, it might lead you that actually one or two of your teams are slightly rogue because you just have, either you already have two players from a team, or you have sort of two players from a team and you have a particular week where they play Plymouth at home, for example. Um, so I think, that's the sort of thing that can sort of shape it a little bit. Um, I'd flag up something like game week 22. Leeds play Oxford at home. Middlesbrough play Plymouth away. Um, two teams like that. Potential options. I mean, you've got um, sort of game week 18. Leeds play Blackburn away, um, and you've got sort of West Brom play Preston, that sort of thing. Middlesbrough play Hull that week. Millwall play Oxford that week, where you could potentially find something in there. Um, Also in game week 22, you have something like Luton play Derby at home. Um,
I'm not
Coventry.
sure which three Luton players.
Yeah, I mean, good luck. Good luck finding three
Yeah,
Luton
good luck.
players, but you know, um, I mean, game week sort of 21. I mean, Leeds play away at Preston, and Sheffield United play Plymouth at home. Um, there's things that slot into all of these in terms of like there's weeks in there, particularly depending on the three teams you want to use, um, where you can find something to fit sort of the players you've got. Same with triple triple. And as we've said, I think for me, the third one will just depend how it goes along. Particularly not necessarily feeling great about some of those other boosts. It might be that something like, okay, if I run into like five issues, I'll just play an overhaul or something like that. But for those, for example, looking at home advantage, I know it's quite quick. Game week 17, Burnley, um, Leeds, Middlesbrough, Norwich, Sheffield United, and Sunderland, all at home. So particularly if you're looking for a boost like that, you're not often going to have something that looks that good. Similar for game week 19. I mean, Burnley have a tough home game, but they are at home. But Leeds are at home, Luton are at home, Millwall are at home, uh, Sunderland are at home. So, you can find enough in there, I think, in the short term. And then as you go ahead, you might find something similar. We've had numerous weeks so far where people have sort of fallen in, for example, into away days where they just happen to have sort of like 10 players for the upcoming game away. So they've made a move for that. And I think you might fall into something like that. Looking at home advantage. Realize I've covered quite a few bases there. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you can sort of pick out there, Dan, and your thoughts on the boost you're going to play and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think we discussed it right at the start, didn't we? Follow leader, triple triple are probably the two most popular, and then you can never rule out an overhaul just in case the team could become a mess. But I think it'll just be home advantage, maybe. I'm not thrilled about that, but
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sort of trying to throw people off, but I think it's just sort of showing that depending on exactly what you want to do with something like home advantage or follow the leader, there are quite a few weeks coming up where it can fit together. It just sort of depends. We also don't want to speak too much on the construction of people's teams. Like, it doesn't work great for the audio if you suddenly start sending us your teams, but just in terms of like being able to say, okay, you should do this. We can't necessarily do that without knowing what your teams look like. So giving rough ideas for people of various weeks that might sort of pan out that way. Also haven't looked ahead if any of those are sort of midweeks where you might sort of decide I don't want to play a boost in a midweek, in which case you look at something else. Um, so yeah, that's all the questions we've actually had this week. Um, Thank you to those of you who sent a question in. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to cover off before we finish, Dan.
I don't know. I think we've covered a lot,
Oh,
haven't we?
did we talk about Coventry getting rid of Mark Robbins?
No, we
I don't think we
didn't.
have.
It's weird because they haven't done well for quite a while, but if they're bringing in if they are bringing in Lampard, that just screams out bad decision, I think. But let's put it this way: if Luton got rid of Edwards, I would like Robbins. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen fans of a few teams around who have managers on shaky footing who have been like, okay, maybe we should make the move now with Mark Robbins being available. I think he'll probably take a little bit of a break. Um, and he will have no shortage of suitors whenever he does decide that he wants to take another job.
But his stock might rise pretty quick.
Yeah, yes. I have to say I'm a little bit surprised. I'm surprised both that Coventry are going for Frank Lampard. I'm a little bit surprised that Frank Lampard is willing to take the job. He's shown that he wasn't really willing to drop down to the Championship previously. So I find it interesting that he's changed his mind now. And it'd be interesting to see how that goes because there is potential in that Coventry team, but how much you also start to question a little bit. I'm not saying, oh, they belong where they are, but there's a number of teams who are rising at the moment, and even if it's sort of like they start playing a bit better, but they're not necessarily getting the rise up the table, how exactly the vibes go, um, it remains to be seen. But it's certainly interesting, and um, I'm not shocked that they sacked him, but um, it's a shame, I guess, when someone's been with the club for so long, achieved so much with that club, when it's like, okay, they move on. Whether it's the right decision or not, it's just a bit of a shame as a starting point.
Yeah, I think it was a shock because I thought he'd have got to the international break, but yeah, I don't know. I just we'll see.
But yeah, I think that does cover everything now. If there's anything we've forgotten, then too bad. We've been going for about an hour and a half now, and I think that gives people plenty of sort of food for thought across the international break. Deadline is next Friday. Um,
Is it Watford again? Do I have to watch Watford again?
Plymouth Watford. Oh, Chakvetadze time. Another reason for Joe to buy Chakvetadze. uh, might captain him now just for that. Um,
I'm not really
uh,
sure. I might captain him.
but yeah, so we'll, we won't do another pod before then. Team news will be done and everything, but um, we won't have a pod between now and then. Reach out if you have any questions closer to the time. Don't ask me sort of this week what's going on with like Doughty because I'm definitely not looking. But if you have any questions or thoughts or anything, just shout and we will do our best to respond. But all that's left for me to say now is thank you for listening and goodbye.
Goodbye.